Hello, and welcome to Wands and Fronds, the weekly podcast where we cover magic, herbalism, and more. I'm Nick,
And I'm Shannon.
and we are your co hosts. So today I'm diving into some of the and more section and talking about the magical creature, the Manticore.
Ooh, scary. The
Spooky.
Manticore freaks me out, which we will talk about why. But I'm talking about Lady's Mantle. So this is a plant that has lots of like delicious grounding energy, but also allegedly could help you find the Philosopher's Stone, which hell yeah. But I'm also doing for you, Nick, an intro to a deity from ancient Mesopotamia, Enki, which is like, guess what? Mesopotamian deities are fucking hard to cover because there's a lot of information that comes out over like nearly 7,000 years. So,
Well, and I think something that people should keep in mind with stuff like this is if you take a more recent deity, like let's just say Artemis, who we love and adore here at Wands and Fronds, how different groups of people worshipped Artemis and this different kind of myths that come out of that. And then you just multiply that by magnitudes of like extra thousands of years.
yeah. And it's like the Sumerian pantheon wasn't as big as the Greek one. So it's like the equivalents, the quote unquote Greek equivalents for like Sumerian deities, sometimes it's like multiple deities that
Yeah.
represent all of the shit that like one Mesopotamian deity was getting up in. So
Yeah, the Greeks are like chipping them down into smaller bits.
yeah, and I love that system because it's a lot easier to keep track of. But Nick, I'm so sad that you're not here anymore. But tell me about when you felt magical this week because you've been home for like 5 minutes.
Yeah, I have been home for exactly 5 minutes. Truth be told, I have not unpacked yet. But when I felt the magic this week, I have two. So the first is going to be when I came home, my greeting from my cats. I always feel especially sort of in my power when it comes to like my connection with my animals.
Hmm.
Um, and they really did miss me. And it was almost like, it's like people expect behavior like that from dogs.
Yeah, people, I find that like not cat people do not give them enough credit
They
for being
don't.
affectionate as fuck because they
They are
are.
they are affectionate as fuck. And so I really felt welcomed home. But I will also say, so I did this really cool thing where because I had taken so much time off for my vacation, I did not give myself a day to like properly recover. On my way back, like basically I came in at like 8, 9 p.m. and then was at work the next day.
Yeah, I also, I mean, my vacation wasn't as long as yours, but I was also regretting that I didn't give myself a day after you left because holy fuck, I was tired.
But all of that to say, that day particularly, it looked like rain, but it was not until in the forecast until way later, and then it was supposed to stop before I got off of work. So I didn't bring my umbrella because I commute on foot a lot of the way, and then that's just extra space in my backpack being taken up by a big ass umbrella. So
Yeah.
I'm like, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. Of course, it starts like a monsoon downpour. Now, keep in mind, it hasn't rained in like several weeks, perhaps even well over a month here in Austin. We're in a huge drought. But we were having this torrential downpour solely for the duration of my bus ride. And then it was like someone flipped a switch. And then when I got off the bus, it stopped raining. So I was like, okay.
Oh, I love that for you. Love that journey for you. Um, I think for me, it was really like, so yesterday I spent like most of the day gardening because like when Nick was here, you got to see I had all of that soil and all the mulch, and I'll have to like upload pictures and send you pictures because I really like went hard yesterday and like kind of cleaning up the little like herb, like not herb garden, my little like vegetable gardening area. And I planted a bunch of like cosmos, and I planted some more like black hollyhock and foxglove along the back wall. I pulled up the cucumbers because it's just hit that point of the year where it's like too hot and things are getting crispy. It's also like really humid in LA today. It's like over 80% humidity. So what a weird time. But literally, it was like I was so dirty. I was like caked in dirt and a little sunburned and just feeling like I don't know. I was just like feeling my green witch magic yesterday because I love that. Like, to me, there's nothing that makes me feel more magical than literally being like covered in soil and sweaty and just like mwah, chef's kiss. It was like beautiful. And my pumpkins are flowering, which always helps.
And I saw that, and I'm so excited to see baby pumpkins, and I hope no one, especially not a bird or a squirrel, ruins that for you.
Oh my God. I put so much cayenne everywhere yesterday after I finished planting everything. Like literally, I'll send you a picture after this, Nick, because everything is like red. It's like dusted in red because I was like, fuck you, squirrels.
No,
Not coming
okay.
for it.
I mean, I know that it's like not like it's not unhealthy for the squirrels to get a little dose of the cayenne, but I do think it would be funny just to see with their spicy little hands.
Right. The good news is for anyone that like is a squirrel sympathizer, we'll say, because fuck them. They say that the squirrels and like other animals can smell the heat, so it's not hurting them. So calm down, fucking PETA. Chill out. These assholes keep trying to ruin my garden. Like, fuck off. But let's get going because I'm actually excited to talk about Lady's Mantle. So, Lady's Mantle, or Alchemilla vulgaris, is in the Rosaceae family, the rose family, lovely little rose friend. It's associated with the female reproductive system, your gut, your skin, everything that makes you like a beautiful Venusian goddess. I just like reading about Lady's Mantle. I get so much Libra energy. So I'm like, Libras, my friends, we're going to talk about how you can use this in beauty magic. And I'm just like loving this as a journey for y'all. So, common names you'll see associated with it are lion's foot, bear's foot, nine hooks, stellaria, and greater sanicle, which that last one's a weird one, but greater sanicle is related to its like association with healing herbal properties during the Middle Ages. But I love stellaria. Like, also, Stellaria sounds like a drag name.
Oh my god, like, yeah, Stellaria.
Like a witchy drag name. Um
Okay,
so
but tell me why. I was like, what would you be like? And then my brain was like, Galexandria.
Galexandria, Stellaria and Galexandria.
They're drag sisters.
Yeah, I'm like, Katya and Trixie, eat your heart out. Like, I'm here for it. So Lady's Mantle, it grows really widely throughout Britain, Ireland, and Greenland, as well as mainland Europe and Northern Asia. But you can also find it in like the northeastern US. But like that, like Ireland is its home. It loves it. Gives you some insight into how fucking hard it's going to be for a lot of us to grow it. But the plant is stunning, right? It has this like beautiful black rootstock, a straight thin stem that gets up to like 1.5 feet tall. So it's not a super tall boy. We've been talking about a lot of like leggy plants. This is not one of them. The stem and leaves are all covered in these like tiny little hairs that catch dewdrops, which we'll talk about. And the lower leaves are actually like kidney shaped and they get to like 6 to 9 inches across. So the lower leaves get big and they're cut into like 7 or 9 lobes with fine tooth edges. And the flowers that it puts off are like gorgeous. Like they're chartreuse. They come up in early spring, fade by midsummer, and they're like star-shaped flowers that don't actually have like petals, but a 4-cleft calyx with like 4 small little bracteoles. So like if you imagine, it almost looks like from far away, it kind of looks a little bit like baby cauliflowers because it's just like these bunches of like tiny little flowers that like don't have petals. But up close, they're like really, really pretty. They are, though, really known for their leaves, right? Like the leaves are the showstoppers. They're silvery green, and those tiny little hairs like catch morning dew. So they like sparkle in the morning sun.
They're having an Edward Cullen moment.
They are like Edward Cullen and all of the Stephanie Meyer's fucking vampires are probably based off of Lady's Mantle. And the association with alchemists here is like where the Latin name comes from, alchemilla, because alchemists would actually like collect the leaves and like turn them into little cups to drink the morning dew, which is said that it'll help give you the power to find the philosopher's stone. And I'm like, give it a shot. What's the worst that can happen? You don't have a philosopher's stone at the end. You don't have one now. Might as well look for it. Also, if you find it because of this, I feel like we get a finder's fee. So it's really like not going to be in the cards for most of us to grow it though, because it, especially with climate change, it really wants to be somewhere that like feels like Ireland, right? Like it's not too hot or sunny. It wants to be a little damp. So I'm not going to be able to really grow it well out here in California unless I work way harder than I can afford to, because I got other plants to take care of. We are also in a hell of a drought. But if you are somewhere that lives in like Ireland or somewhere that's like beautiful, bleh, you and your weather, just keep in mind it doesn't like to be crowded. It does really need like its own space. But let's talk about medicinal uses, shall we? So, disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. I'm not a doctor. Nick's not a doctor. This podcast is not intended to treat or diagnose any medical issues. Just always talk to your medical care professional before you start on any sort of herbal regimen, because remember, shit has weird interactions and only you and your doctor and hopefully your herbalist are going to be really well familiar with everything that you're on. So it was a very well-known herbal ally throughout the Middle Ages, and it was actually considered like one of the strongest wound healers, but it kind of like shifted into being a plant used primarily for like women's health during the Renaissance, because it picked up the name lady's mantle because the folds of the leaves look like a woman's cloak, allegedly. I feel like we get a little loosey-goosey with what we say plants look like, but here we are. And so Linnaeus adopted the term like lady's mantle in 1532. A lot of this like kind of goes back to a translation from like Germanic herbal books into like English. And so Linnaeus adopts this like official term in the 1500s, and onward from there it's like really exclusively used for like reproductive health system stuff until, you know, a little bit more recently. So nowadays, lady's mantle is what Michael Moore, the herbalist, calls a yarfa, which is yet another rose family astringent. And like herbalist humor. Am I right?
Oh yeah.
Yarfa.
You're
So it's helpful for uterine issues because it can like tone and tighten overly damp or like prolapse tissues, and it helps dry like excessive bleeding or discharge. I also love this for people that have like IBS-D, so IBS that manifests with diarrhea. And with that, it can be like a good background plant to use regularly to help like tone and tighten things, because there are some people that subscribe to the leaky gut theory. Choose your own adventure there. Not everyone buys into it, but you know, it's one of those that I think you could add in with like more intense astringents from time to time, but it's actually like really delicious. It kind of tastes like it's got this like light tannic flavor, almost like a green, like a really mild green or a white tea. You know, it's like not
Ooh.
super strong, but it's great with like, I love the idea, Nick. This one's for you. A tea of like lady's mantle, lemon verbena, and mint with just like
Oh.
a squeeze of lemon.
Mm.
Right? Because we all have those times when we get overly moist, right? Which sounds gross, but like that's what happens. Like sometimes you get a little upset tummy and you could use an astringent. This tea, especially if you like, God, there's nothing worse than having diarrhea when it's hot outside in the summer. Make this tea for yourself.
A little iced tea moment, even. Yum yum.
Yes,
Yum yum
exactly.
yum.
Also, though, if you tend to run dry or you're someone who like gets constipated, don't add this in because it can exacerbate that. Like if you're someone who runs dry, you're gonna like want to be very cautious with astringents. That's not something I have any experience with because my tissues are just like, how moist can we be? But some people apparently run dry. Also, if your pregnant, like this plant is generally considered safe for most people, but if you're pregnant and you're needing something that's like uterine toning, it's most often recommended to use like raspberry leaf instead of lady's mantle. So just like, again, work with your doctor, especially if you're creating a crotch goblin, because there's all sorts of weird shit you have to deal with there. So you do want to harvest the lady's mantle leaves and stems in early summer, just as it starts to bloom. And you want to like pick them when they're tender and it still has dew on them. Like you're going to go out and you're going to feel like a medieval alchemist harvesting this like dew covered leaf. I really wish I could grow it. And then you want to like spread them out to dry them on screens. And then you can use it. Primarily it's used in teas, and with it being so tasty, because I've had it dried. With it being so tasty, I don't understand why you wouldn't just use it in a tea. That's just me. I'm a tea ho. Nick and I both are bevy people.
We're both beverage people.
I'm like beverage witches subset of our witchcraft practices. So let's talk about magic though. Like obviously I love that this is like an alchemist plant, right? Like I adore that. I'm obsessed. Alchemy I think is fascinating, and it's a good magic friend because of that. So it's heavily associated with like Venus and the water element. It has these like really long-standing historical associations with Freya, but also with the Virgin Mary, right? So like if you're a Christian witch or you work with the Virgin Mary iconography, lady's mantle's associated with her as well. So it's like those goddesses, it has a lot of like fertility associations because of that. But that the Nusian side, you'll often also see it recommended for love magic. And there's so many recommendations to like drink the dew or apply it to your skin. And that's said to help like attract love and bestow everlasting beauty. So I've talked in the past about making makeup, like making magically infused makeup. I love the idea of harvesting the dew to use as like the water in one of these makeups that you make, like making a little like charcoal eyeliner with it, or even like adding a bit of it to like a smashed blueberry blush or lip stain that you're making. Like how hot is that? So again, though, there's like so much fertility magic with it as well, though, which I think is the fertility here I think would be good to think about as like relational fertility. So not necessarily having a baby, but like having fertile relationships, friendships. Because again, I think love magic, so often we get hooked on romantic love, but it's like, dude, the love of friendship is one of the most nourishing things in your entire life. So
I just got to spend like a week with my bestie, and I can confirm this.
Nourishing. So, make yourself a lady's mantle tea and like sprinkle in some of this. I also really like the idea of harvesting the dew and adding it to a pitcher of like moon water. Specifically, all I want is like dew harvested from lady's mantle added to a fucking gallon of water that you charge under a Libra moon. Like, fuck me up. That's going to be gorgeous. Add it to a beauty bath with some fucking like rose quartz on the edge of your tub. Sprinkle in some like lady's mantle flowers and rose petals, and just like you will transform into Venus. Like you're just going to turn into a fucking goddess. They do say though that like the flower essence is good for grounding and connecting to green magic. So like hi green witches. Some folks suggest like adding the dewdrops to your third eye area to help clear the way for prophetic visions. But because it's associated with the Fae, I love the idea of using the dewdrops on your third eye to help you connect to the other world. Of course, fairies like the magical dew, so you can use it as an offering. But with this connection to like grounding with the flower essences, like even if you can't get the dewdrops, because dewdrops are not able to be obtained by everybody, you could like either make a flower essence with it if you have some of the flowers, because you can make dried flower essences, or make a tea with it, apply a little bit to your third eye, go out, commune with the Fae. Like,
love that.
Wonderful.
Love that.
Drink yourself some tea. So again, it's like, this is one that kind of has like a lot of different uses, but I love the tie-ins to like the other world, green magic, love. And I think you can see where I'm getting like the Libra vibes here. It's like sensual, but not necessarily sexual. And
I was like, That's a good vibe. That's a good vibe.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So, my sources today were Herbarium, Grow Your Own Herbal Remedies by Maria Noel Groves, Cunningham's Encyclopedia of Magical Herbs, starkchild.co.uk, and My Lovely Magical Brain. So,
Most excellent. Most excellent. And honestly, it's actually kind of nice to be back in like a normal episode.
I know it was wild. I feel like just having a small break, I think was good. Because I know
Yes.
we've been like, oh, this is episode 94, guys. We've been like working on this for a while. I think it was good to have a little break. But it is nice to get back to the research and like that. This helps me root so much in my magic too. So it's like,
Oh, absolutely. And it's like I was listening to, of course, I always am like, what do the other podcasts have to say when it comes to like deities and magical creatures? Because A, I'm a nosy bitch, and B, it's just fun to do.
it
It's fun to
is.
do, especially with something like the Manticore.
Yeah.
Um, just to kind of get that soft opening there. Um, because it's just, to me, anything to do with like monsters, I don't know, maybe it's because as a little kid, like all the shows I watched, like Pokemon and stuff, were like battling, like creatures battling or whatever. Like I'm always like Manticore. I just imagine like the Manticore fighting.
Yeah. Manticores seem fucking brutal.
Manticores seem brutal as fuck, and I can't help but notice that Manticore kind of sounds like a genre of like hardcore
Porn.
hardcore music.
Oh,
Like
to me, I'm like, porn is what I think of with Manticore. They scare me. Like creepy, scary, kinky, weird corner of the internet sex porn. Like, oh,
you know
oh,
what? Unfortunately, actually, so and this is before I'm getting into the actual segment, Manticore is apparently a brand of crossbow. So
what the fuck?
I had to filter out a lot of crossbows for sale while doing this segment.
Oh my god,
Uh,
that's so weird.
but also I love that in the medieval art, the Manticore always kind of looks like a goofy little guy,
He
and then
does.
but they're now Manticores are in Dungeons and Dragons famously, and a lot of young adult fantasy series, one of which was written by a TERF, for instance. So, but now that they've come back around into like the modern fantasy realm, they're kind of presented as more like badass, and you kind of see like more winged manticores.
Yeah. It's like the wings, I think, are the cool part of the Manticore. The scorpion part terrifies me.
The scorpion part is scary. The scorpion part is very scary, but it's also, but yeah, it's just like the goofy medieval art of manticores, like medieval art of anything, like a dolphin.
Oh, but I love like medieval artwork also of things like tigers
Yeah, they had
or elephants, where it's like you can tell it was a telephone game describing to them what these creatures were, and like they all look derpy as fuck.
derpy, derpy, derpy. It's like what makes you think that's what an animal's face would look like? Like I don't, I just, I don't, I can't. I can't. But we
No.
have to. We must keep going. So, in order to tell the story of the Manticore, we have to go all the way back to the 5th century BCE, which is an awfully long time ago, though not especially long for this podcast, especially with the segment coming up. But during this time, a Greek physician by the name of Ctesias made a career for himself by serving as the royal doctor in the court of Xerxes II in the exotic land of Persia. So, keeping in mind that people walked everywhere back in the day, that is pretty far away. Okay. So, this was apparently a pretty cushy gig for Ctesias because he did it for over 20 years. And keeping in mind that people died when they were 30 back in the day, that's a really long time for a guy to just be like, or not in Mesopotamia, in Persia, just being a doctor. So he was
Yeah,
there.
just doctoring it up.
I mean, truly, in ancient times, 20 years could very well have been a lifetime, you know, easily. So he's there for a long time, though. And more importantly, Persia is situated on what would later be known as the Silk Road. So not only is he getting this taste of Persian culture, which is an exotic culture if you are a Greek national at the time, but also you're kind of hearing these stories about places like India, which according to the Greeks and the Greek map of the world, India was the edge of the world. So there's already this kind of mystical notation to India, and then any creature that comes from India is seen as magical and mysterious as well. So he's here, he's learning about these Indian folklores, these Indian stories, these histories even. And he wanted to share what he had learned. So obviously he didn't learn a lot about medicine in Persia, but he learned a lot about India. So he wrote a jazzy little manuscript called Indica, which was meant to be a kind of all-encompassing history of India for Western
The
consumption.
weed.
Like the
Weed.
weed. Actually, it's fun because this might be the origin of the word indica. So, just saying. And, you know, we're here, we're queer. So he writes Indica, and the book is a hit, and it becomes a common reference source for other writers and philosophers later on, including Pliny the Elder and Aristotle. So the part of this book that we're interested in today is the bestiary, which is a kind of catalog of creatures. So he writes this book, Indica, and it's like, here's the history, here's the folklore, here's all the crazy animals that live there. And that, I'm sorry, is probably where a lot of those derpy ass animal pictures come from. Because Indica was a very popular book, and it was copied and recopied many times. And I'm sure there is an illuminated Indica manuscript out there somewhere.
But also, I just like to think of the artists being fucking stoned off their ass while they're drawing those derpy looking tigers.
Very, very true. Very, very true. I would be. I mean, I'm like trying not to laugh thinking about it.
I know. I'm like, can we all just go get okay? Every listener that indulges in cannabis, only if it's legal, we're not telling you to break the law. Get super stoned and draw a manticore and send us pictures because I just want to see what you come up with.
Oh my god,
Please.
that is a great challenge for the week. Okay, to all of you
Please,
bitches out
for
there,
the love of
please get
God.
high and draw a manticore. So, the bestiary in Indica contains the manticore and a bunch of other real shit, like Asian elephants and white rhinos and various kinds of monkeys, which they thought was very exotic shit. I mean, it is exotic shit. We don't have monkeys here. So there's all these very, very real animals that he's heard about secondhand. But the manticore, which is a mythical creature, was supposedly one of the few animals that he actually saw in person. So that's, I mean, like full stop here. That I think is a very interesting layer to the story. So Asian elephants, he's hearing about secondhand, right? Tigers, leopards, panthers, all of this shit, which there are some very derpy tigers and leopards out there in medieval manuscripts, just saying. He's hearing about this shit secondhand, but the manticore was supposedly given to Xerxes II by an Indian prince as a gift. That's a terrible gift, by the way.
Yeah, no one think that that's gonna win you points.
I mean, that's basically like getting a minotaur as a gift, and you have to like build a massive labyrinth to keep it in, or else it's going to attack everyone.
It's like it's both a job, it's like a gift, but also a fucking job assignment. No, thank you.
Yeah, it's like, no. Don't give me chores. Chores is not a gift. So you have a
No.
fucking manticore to deal with. But no, so I think that's what really blew my mind about this whole thing is, yeah, he's like, the manticore was the thing that they brought for us to see. So you're probably wondering, what the fuck is a manticore? Okay, but we're gonna get there. And we do have to give Ctesias the credit, just to say here, that he does say that he just heard about a lot of this shit. Okay. I mean, which to me makes actually seeing the Manticore seem almost more real. Because he's like, yeah, I've only ever heard about tigers. Like, just so you guys know, I never saw a tiger. But I did see the fucking Manticore. Um, but what is a Manticore? Hold your horses. It's so fun. In the nitty-gritty of it all, though, a Manticore is classified as a chimera. So, like the Sphinx out of Egypt or the sea goat of Capricorn fame. This basically means that it is a creature with body parts of multiple different creatures, so a biological ragdoll or the god's own Frankenstein monster. Centaurs, also a chimera. There's a lot of chimeras in Greek mythology. So when you think of like satyrs, the little goat dudes, that's a chimera. Okay. But the manticore is creepier by several magnitudes than a satyr. Because it's the body of a red lion, the face of an old man, and the tail either of a scorpion or a dragon. And as if that was not a spooky uki enough combo, shark teeth. Like multiple rows, 3 in most myths, 3 rows
Why?
of shark teeth. Oh,
Spoopy.
and did I mention that it has like the detachable snake jaw so that it can swallow things whole? Yeah,
Outraged. I'm outraged.
it can unhinge its jaw. So there seems to be some debate though about the manticore's voice and whether or not it sounds like a trumpet or a reed flute, which are very different sounds. But the consensus being here that it has magical luring properties, like a siren song or the music of the Pied Piper, which is why I kind of lean more towards like the pan flute. If it's Pied Piper vibes, I think it's probably more flutey. But that's conjecture, okay? Which, having a siren song, though, is convenient for a hyper apex predator. And so keep in mind the whole thing about the apex predator, because I wanted to talk about that a little bit later on. So, the manticore, though, how did such a creature hunt? And this I thought was spooky, ooky. So basically, in the story that I had heard, the manticore would like crouch down. You know how cats crouch when they're hunting, right? And it has the body of a lion. So it's all crouched down. Okay. So it's just the human face popped up over the edge of like a bush or something, like a bush or a wall.
The fuck? That's haunting.
And then it's got this sort of music. And so you follow the music and you see this little old man face sort of peeking at you over a hedge, for instance, or a fence, or whatever the manticore is using to conceal its true nature. And of course, you're called. You feel like you should help this old man who's obviously out in the wilderness somewhere, right? And then once you get close enough, the tail comes out. And if you're close enough, it just can whip like a scorpion's tail and just stab you with this like venomous poison that paralyzes you so that the Manticore can then eat you with its terrifying, unhinged shark mouth. Which, can you imagine, like, the little old man face, and then the jaw unhinges, and then the mouth is full of shark teeth? Like, that's scary imagery.
This is why the Minotaur, not the Minotaur, oh my God. I am so fucking freaked out by the Manticore. Like, I love horror, but something about the Manticore deeply scares me.
It's disturbing. It's absolutely disturbing. So, also, supposedly, the Manticore could regrow the spike on the end of its tail an infinite number of times and shoot it out like a projectile. So it's got a range weapon and sort of a close range weapon. Projectiles. Like projectile stingers that then you're paralyzed and then it eats you in one big bite. So just some nightmare fuel for everyone out there. But then how would you go about hunting a Manticore? And so this is another interesting story that comes out of India and the method for hunting a Manticore. So there is one animal in the entire animal kingdom which is immune to the venom of the Manticore, and it is the elephant. And so if you were hunting a Manticore, you would do so while riding an elephant. And also it kind of gets you up off the ground, which is out of the shooting range. And so hopefully the elephant takes all the hits and you try to kill it with a crossbow, which is probably why the crossbow is called Manticore. I'm kind of putting that together in my head now. Or a spear. And also, really, they would try to go for baby manticores because adult manticores are basically impossible to kill. Like a Wendigo.
Oh my God, the Wendigo!
Yeah, so an adult manticore, basically impossible to kill, so they would try to go for juveniles, and you would do so on the back of an elephant. So some great news there, if you were wondering. And also maybe skin suit. Don't get an elephant skin suit. Yeah, no. But riding an elephant while hunting, as long as the elephant's okay, it does sound kind of cool. It's very like Lord of the Rings. Like, I don't know. Yeah. But okay, so
I get it.
So the Manticore, though, has these associations with basically being invincible, and it becomes part of heraldic imagery. So this is the kind of shit you would see on people's flags, like a knight's shield, etc., etc., etc. Royalty liked it because, it's sort of like a gargoyle kind of a totem where, you'd have this Manticore imagery and that would be like protective, right? And also represent that you as the ruler are invincible. But this kind of tilted more towards being tyrannical. So apparently people who liked using the Manticore as their heraldic imagery ultimately tended to be more tyrannical, and so the Manticore becomes associated with tyrants later on in this sort of journey of the heraldic meaning of the Manticore. And actually, if you look at the heraldic Manticore, you would be like, oh, that's fucking everywhere, because a lot of flags and shield art and stuff features the stylized Manticore, which is especially for this kind of art. But the Manticore was also an important symbol of the prophet Jeremiah, who was famously thrown into a dung pit. Something about how Manticores come from the depths of hell, and like Jeremiah getting thrown into a dung pit was like, I guess, close to being in the depths of hell. But okay, so the Manticore myth lingers around in Europe for a long time. And again, Indica was a very popular book, basically a New York Times bestseller. And where does it linger? But in Spain. Now, this makes sense to me because ultimately, this book would probably have been translated to Latin first, which was the official language of Spain for a very long time, and ultimately became Spanish, which is a Latin-based language. Hello. But it ends up becoming the only place that still had like local legends about Manticore attacks was Spain. And even in the 1930s, Spanish peasants were still talking about manticores like attacking livestock. Shannon, I see the look on your face. You're like, is this going where I think it's going? Yes, because the
Here it
manticore
is.
myth in Spain kind of evolved into this like cryptid that attacks livestock and is very, very spooky. Well, guess what? In Latin America, which was primarily settled by Spanish people, colonized, the appropriate word is colonized. I'm settled is a American history book term. Colonized by Spanish people, it really makes sense that perhaps the chupacabra, out of which originally is from Puerto Rico, which is a very Spanish place. Yeah. So is the myth of the manticore the origin of the myth of the chupacabra?
Oh shit. Also, I love the game where it's like with every alleged chupacabra sighting, it's like, is it a chupacabra or is it a coyote with mange?
Oh, I mean, absolutely super fair. But I just love I love just sort of the idea of the chupacabra. Just like this spooky ass thing that just sucks the blood out of cows and sheep and stuff. Very,
It's
very
yeah,
spooky.
it's very spooky. It's very spooky.
But also the manticore, I will say, just to kind of round it out here, the original manticore did not have wings, and I'm sorry to disappoint you, Shannon. That is mostly a modern addition.
I'm
But I
disappointed in that.
but I think it looks scarier with wings, and I actually prefer the more modern version of the manticore anyway. So I'm kind of with you on that one.
Yeah.
Like just having a scorpion tail isn't like the spookiest thing in the world, you know.
Yeah, no, it's like just a scorpion tail. I mean, I hate it, but I
But
can
the
deal with it.
but the bat wings really add something.
Yeah, it's like the bat wings are also, I think, the thing that makes it like oddly sexual because I find that there's kind of like a weird sexualized angle to a lot of chimera because
Yeah,
it is like this
yeah.
weird mashup of like I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into that, but anytime I see chimera coming up in myths, there always to me feels like there's this weird layer of sexual tension in it and it just freaks me out.
Yeah, it's like why did you give it a human face?
Yes. It's like, did you give it a human face so you could like feel better about wanting to fuck it? Maybe I'm wrong.
These
But
are these are the important questions to ask. And I'm sure some for some furry in the community out there because there are like fantasy furries. I know this much is
yeah,
true from the Centaur episode.
from your close personal experience. I'm just kidding.
From my close
Um
personal experience, no. But there are like fantasy furries out there whose like personas are sort of mythical creatures. So I would I would imagine that someone out there is serving Manticore
yeah,
somewhere on Tumblr.
surely.
Somewhere on Tumblr there is some very erotic Manticore literotica.
Yeah. So, okay, Nick, well before we get into Enki, If people want to get in touch with us, how could they do that?
Okay, so we've actually made it very, very easy. So what you're going to want to remember is Wands and Fronds Pod, because if you wanted to email us, you could do so at wandsandfrondspod@gmail.com. That is also a handle for our Instagram, Wands and Fronds Pod. Easy fucking peasy. But also, if you really, really, really wanted to support this podcast, which is not free to make, as we keep reminding you, you could go on over to Patreon, get some really fun bonus content, see our smiling faces every single week, and you could do that at Wands and Fronds Pod. So,
Yeah. Patreon.com/wandsandfrondspod. Rate, review, subscribe. Go give us some stars. Write about how great you think we are. You guys know how to be good podcast listeners. We love you. Okay, Nick. This one goes out to you, though, because I'm covering a Sumerian deity. We're going to be in ancient Mesopotamia. We're talking about Enki. So Enki is also known as like Ea, Enkig, Nidamud, Ninsiku, and he's the Sumerian god of wisdom, fresh water, intelligence, trickery and mischief, crafts, magic, exorcism, healing, creation, virility, fertility, and art.
a man of many talents.
Truly a multi-hyphenate, giving Beyonce a run for her money. So a lot of times we get these pictures of him and he's shown with like a long beard, wearing a cap with horns, long robes, and like ascending the mountain of the sunrise. And a lot of times in Sumerian texts, he's like portrayed very sexually because there's this like big association between the life-giving properties of his semen and the nature of fresh water from the Abzu. So the Abzu is like a really important place in Mesopotamian lore, right? So this is supposed to be an ocean that's underneath the earth. And Babylon is said to have been built on top of the Abzu. And we all know Babylon is like a very important ancient city. So Enki, though, has a lot of like strong associations, right, with magic and spellcraft. And he's a really been like a really popular deity for seers, diviners, and also priests who specialize in exorcism. So he has a lot of like strong associations to like ancient woo as well, which I love. And of course, like being a patron of like the arts and crafts, he's really associated with quote unquote like civilization, which is where you get a lot of like the comparisons to like Prometheus. And he is sometimes also really portrayed as like a trickster spirit. So he has the ability to resurrect the dead as well. Like he's kind of all over the place. But you know what? He's a jack of all trades, master of none, but still always better than a master of one. Am I
Oh,
right?
absolutely. And I just want to say, like, it's giving.
It's giving. And so initially, like he was primarily like the Sumerian deity of fresh water and a patron of the city of Eridu, which was considered by the Mesopotamians the first city established at the beginning of the world. And we've talked about Eridu before, the first city. And here Enki presides over the Abzu, but also not just like the Abzu itself, but also like the mystical parts of this like it's an ocean under the water. It's a primordial marsh. But this is also where like the city of Eridu and life in general was thought to have come from. So he has this minister, Izamud, and him and Enki have like assorted creatures at their service, including giants, demons, both good demons and bad demons, and other mystical beings like mermen and mermaids. So it's like all over the place, like every magical creature, and also the seven sages, the Abgal, live with Enki, like in his palace. So we first see Enki coming up in literature in the dynastic period 3A, which is from 2600 to 2350 BCE. And he's really established as like an important god of the Akkadians by around 2400 BCE, who knew him as Ea. So Enki is the son of Anu, the sky god in Sumerian and Akkadian mythology, and also the son of Apsu. So Apsu is like the primordial father in Babylonian texts. So we're going to kind of like go back and forth a little bit between Sumerian and Akkadian, but this is like talking about the same deity. And his mother in the mythology is the goddess Namu, a primordial mother goddess who gives birth to the earth and the heavens. And he is the husband of Ninhursag, and they have several sons. Asurlui, which is the god of magical knowledge, Endelulu, the god of canals and dikes, and the human sage Adapa. And most importantly, for a lot of lore, Marduk, who is the king of the gods. Marduk is kind of like a really big deal, which we'll talk about right now. So, according to the Babylonian Enuma Elish, which was written in 1100 BCE, Enki is like the oldest of the first gods. He's a firstborn. And at the beginning of time, like it is in so many creation myths, like everything is just like chaos, right? It's all undifferentiated, just like swirling, fucking crazy chaos. And that, like, out of that, we originally get the first separation of Apsu, which is like the male principle personified by fresh water, and Tiamat, which is the female principle defined by salt water. And when we're talking about male and female, it's not necessarily boys and girls. It's really like the creative and the creative external energy and like the creative internal energy. Like it's just different creation energies here. And so Apsu and
I
Tiamat give
also I love that the Mesopotamian gender binary is saltwater and freshwater.
right, which means you can boil it down to crocodiles. Because they go in both. So Apsu and Tiamat, though, of course, these like energies give birth to the younger gods. But these younger gods, because everything's still kind of swirling chaos, have nothing to do. And so they're just fucking around and basically being fucking loud, annoying kids. And they distract Apsu and they interrupt his sleep. So he talks to his vizier and he decides, I'm just going to fucking kill him. I can't get any rest. And Tiamat, being like the sweet mommy, overhears this discussion and is like fucking horrified. So she tells her son Enki. And Enki is like, oh, fuck, this is not good. Got to come up with a game plan, right? So he like thinks and thinks and thinks, and he has all these ideas, but he's like, really, at the end of the day, the best one is like, I got to put my father to sleep and then I got to kill him. Because every origin story up until like fucking Christianity basically is like younger gods kill the older gods. Like that's a pretty common theme we see, and this is
Yeah,
probably one of the first ones.
it's really like echoes of like Zeus and Kronos.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So the problem is though, Tiamat never thought that this was going to end in her kids fucking killing her husband partner. So she freaks out a little bit and she puts together an army of demons and monsters, which is led by her consort and champion Kingu. And this army of the older gods, like really is like beating back Enki and the younger gods in battle. Like each time they meet, the younger gods are driven back and they start to get like really desperate. It's giving us like Titans and Olympians here. But at this point, like they're like losing hope. Everything is so sad. This is like the low point of the film. And Murdoch, Enki's son, comes up with this idea, right? So he steps forward and he's like, hey, look, gods, if you let me be your king, I will lead you to victory. And this is actually super clutch because at this point, there was like no general overseeing the younger gods, right? So each god was taking a turn at a command. And you have to think that that's like fucking with your strategy at a certain point. So they're like, okay, fuck it. So Marduk is elected the king and he meets Kingu in single, like one-on-one combat and fucking owns him. And then he shoots Tiamat with an arrow, basically his grandma, and it splits her in two. And so from her eyes, she's like weeping and her tears become the Tigris River and the Euphrates River. And then her body is used by Marduk to fashion the earth. And then Kingu and the other gods who'd encouraged Tiamat's war are executed. Kingu's body is used to create human beings. And so Marduk consults with Enki on all of these things. And, you know, because Enki's his dad. And so Enki is credited sort of as like the co-creator of the world and life. And there are other like creation myths, but Enki is always like pretty fucking clutch. And then we get this other story in the Epic of Gilgamesh, where Enki crafts humans out of clay so they can do work for the gods. And the supreme god here, Enlil, attempts to destroy Enki's newly created humans with a flood because their endless noise keeps him from sleeping. there is a theme here.
There
People
absolutely seems to be a theme here.
people need to get some fucking rest. They're like, I swear to God, if you interrupt my 8, I'm ending you. So Enki sees Enlil's plans, and he instructs a sage named Atrahasis to build an ark to help humanity escape the destruction. Doesn't that sound familiar?
That does sound really familiar.
There's also a story, speaking of stories that sound familiar, in The Descent of Anana, he basically works to rescue his daughter or his niece, depending on the translation, after she's killed by her sister, Ereshkigal, by sending 2 clever demons to trick the Queen of the Dead into giving them Anana's corpse. So he's shown in this story, Anana and the God of Wisdom, also as the professor of the Meh, which I think is kind of funny because Meh is the laws and powers that are concerned with all life and the gifts of civilization, but it's called the Meh, M-E-H. So the Met is like the possession of like the gods alone, and he allows Anana to take it from him when he gets fucking drunk. So we're also getting some of this like Bacchus Pan energy here. And so he sends a bunch of forces to her to like recapture the Met and return them to him. And it seems like she gets away with this treasure like awfully easily, right? But in this, like, they're kind of like showing him as the father that would do anything for his daughter, even if it's not the wisest thing. So it's kind of like he's half-heartedly trying to like get back at her, but he's like, that's my girl. And then we also have this like trickster aspect of him, right? So in this way, he like kind of he's like teaching lessons. There's always like a cosmic lesson in his trickery, even if it doesn't like initially make sense. So like in this case, he allows himself to like get drunk and lets Anana have the meh. But also, we see like in the Epic of Gilgamesh, he consents to the death of Enkidu, who is the best friend of Gilgamesh, the hero of the story. And Enkidu and Gilgamesh have like just gotten back from like another victory when Anana, also known as Ishtar in the story, heyo, and she tries to seduce the hero and Gilgamesh, like listing the many other lovers she's had who met with bad ends. So he refuses her. So she's like, yo, Gilgamesh, let's get down to Bone Town. And Gilgamesh is like, dude, everyone you fuck dies. No, thank you. So for raising his hand against a god, though, what happens here is like, so Anana sends her sister, Ereshkigal's husband, Gugalana, who is the bull of the heaven, to destroy Gilgamesh's realm, and Enkidu kills him, right? So basically, she's mad that she's not getting laid, so she sends her like brother-in-law to kill Gilgamesh and destroy his realm. And Enkidu, being like Gilgamesh's bro, is like, yeah, no, kills him. But Enkidu killed a god, so he has to die. And Enki is like, okay, I mean, like these are the rules. Even though he knows that Anana caused the problems, he knows that humans can't like basically get big heads or they'll challenge the god. But the most important thing here is that Enki realizes that Enkidu's death is going to introduce Gilgamesh to loss, which is going to lead him to an exploration of the meaning of life, which makes him a deeper and more complete individual. So it is this thing where it's like he allows bad things to happen, but he has a good reason. And all of the stories about Enki like seem to agree that he's like a friend of humanity. Like that's where the Prometheus correlations come in, right? It's like he makes these decisions that might seem heartless, but it's all to make humanity better, which at the end of the day is kind of like, oh, that's sweet. So again, it's like we're seeing things here similar to like Poseidon, Prometheus, fuck
I'm
Lucifer.
I'm getting Odin vibes too.
Yeah, Odin vibes, Loki vibes. We're getting like Demeter with her relationship with Persephone. Like there's so much wrapped up in Justin Enki. So like, you know, I think he's a great candidate for a patron deity if you're someone who's into the Mesopotamian pantheon, because of course you can like call upon him for all sorts of stuff. Like he's, I think, like in the vein of people like Odin or Jupiter or Zeus, like kind of being someone that does a little bit of a lot of stuff. so he can be like a good patron deity. But it is hard to like narrow down like a specialty, quote unquote, because really like it's all over the place. We've got 6,500 years plus of stories about this guy. So I think that if this is one that you're called to, like this is an instance where I'm like, you really need to just like follow your intuition on offerings and magical workings, because there's not like one size fits all. It's not like Hecate where it's like, put some keys on your altar, she'll love it. It's like, he'll love a lot of things, but I think offerings need to be really personal too. So, I think that if he calls to you, trust yourself. We've also got to remember how much like Sumerian mythology has been lost, which is another problem with coming up like with a single tool. But there was a book that kept coming up in my research called Sumerian Magic, Enki, God of Magic, Wisdom, Life, and Replenishment, that I think seems like it'd be a good one to check out. There are, of course, like lots of people online that have advice on how to work with him, but I think with Sumerian deities in particular, just because they're so ancient, I'm like, you really need to do some meditating and like getting in touch with yourself, because there's no right answer for something like this. Not that there really is, I think, with most deities, but in particular with deities that can literally like that have correlations to like tens of other deities we've talked about. So anyway, I use like the World History Encyclopedia, Wikipedia, lots of fun Reddit threads. And of course, like there's a lot of quotes from like the various Sumerian epics in here. So that's an intro.
Mesopotamia Reddit is cool.
Mesopotamia Reddit is cool and entirely overwhelming. But that, I mean, it was a fun one, but it's like, I was talking to Nick about this beforehand. I'm like, it's really hard with Sumerian and like ancient Mesopotamian deities to like boil it down. Cause I feel like we could talk about him. There could be an entire podcast about him, because those are like 3 very abridged versions of Enki stories that all have incredibly different flavors. So,
well, no, and it's like, with all of this really ancient mythology too, it's like we definitely, I remember, talked about Inanna during Mermaids.
yeah.
Like the Mesopotamian gods are really all over the place.
Yeah. But it's fun, and I do love that he really is like a magical, like a magician's deity too. I always just love that when there's a deity that like is really into magic. But
No,
also
when you said that like Babylon was like built on like a wellspring of like the like the world ocean or
a
whatever,
primordial marsh is my
I was
favorite description I've seen for it.
I was like, okay, where is Babylon? I mean, I know generally where it is, but I was like, which country specifically is Babylon in? It's in Iraq.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, so we can't visit there right now.
Yeah, not really. And it's fun. I love deities like this because they're so complex, and like I also just really appreciate how much deities, even once they've been parsed out into different deities, like like so many of these things have been going on in like human storytelling forever, which I think is the thing that makes like deity worship and deity work so powerful, is because it's like, even if you don't necessarily think of them as like sky daddies, it's like there's this tulpa effect where so many people have poured so much energy into worshiping these energies for millennia. There's power in that. Like, even if you don't think of them as like tangible people like beings, the energy poured into these stories is massive. And that is like, that's some fucking power right there. So, Enki.
Enki. So we're very close to the bitter end, and before we let everyone go, it's time for the Taroscope. So we are back in proper Wands and Fronds form this week, and I'm giving some bad news.
Woo! Back to normal.
Okay, so this week I drew Taurus for the Taroscope, and then
Oh
we
my God.
got.
I love the Taurus kitty because it looks like it's like reaching up for a scratching post.
It really does. It really does. And also, it has the little horns, which absorbs. I love this zodiac deck. Like, this is such a good addition to the tarot scope. But for you guys this week, I drew the Six of Cups reversed, which
Ooh.
little dragon tarot here. This one's got, instead of a dragon, it's a Viking ship with a dragon
The
front thing.
mast.
Yeah.
Not
So
mast. What's the word for that? Googling it. Hold on. You keep going and I'll figure out what that word is.
so Six of Cups reversed is indicating that you're maybe having this very intense nostalgia moment, which, a little nostalgia here and there is fine, but because of this placement, it's like you're maybe choosing to live in the past, or maybe even fantasizing and kind of living in this place of like, gosh, I wish it was still the good old days. Which I know I know we've had some time off, but I feel like I gave a very similar reading to this recently. And really, the message here is pretty clear. You cannot live in a fantasy. You cannot live in the fantasy. And in certain respects, it's almost kind of selfish to be living in a fantasy instead of dealing with your real life.
Tea.
So it would behoove you to come back down to earth.
I always think of like the reverse Six of Cups as like, don't drunk text your ex.
Don't drunk text your ex. Yeah, the good old days are not coming back. The good old days are not coming back.
They also weren't as good as you like to think they were.
No, you're romanticizing things. So, but all of that to say, NVD, I feel like with Taurus, really is such a headstrong bunch of folks.
Oh, they're not going to fucking listen to us.
They're
tell
not gonna
them.
listen.
They're
We'll
not
tell
going to
them.
listen.
Yeah. And they're gonna text their ex. And then they're gonna have a meltdown.
Yeah. It's called a figurehead on the front of a ship, by the way.
Oh, good. Yes. This is dragon figurehead. Thank you, Shannon. Well, to all of you scorpion tail manticore bitches out there, what do we say, Shannon?
Oh my God. To all of you chimera horrifying witches, blessed be bitches.
Blessed be bitches.
Goodbye.
Bye now.